a leopard cub trapped in a plastic bottle gasping for air, fighting for life. And in that terrifying moment, his brother refused to leave him alone. But what seemed like a heartbreaking accident was only the beginning of something far darker. Because behind the cameras, powerful men were hiding secrets no one was meant to see. When one woman steps in to save the helpless cubs, she stumbles into a dangerous world of lies, betrayal, and unthinkable risks. Every move brings her closer to the truth, closer to exposing what others would kill to protect. But in a fight, where innocence collides with corruption, the question remains, how far would you go to save the ones who can't save themselves? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Keaton Hale's thumb froze mid-scroll as the video filled her phone screen. A tiny leopard cub, no bigger than a house cat, thrashed desperately inside. A cracked plastic water jug, its spotted fur, was pressed against the cloudy plastic as it fought for air. But what broke her heart even more was the second cub, pacing around the trapped one, refusing to leave its sibling behind. "Oh my God," she whispered, her EMT instincts kicking in immediately. The background of the video caught her eye, that distinctive white ranch fencing and the rolling Texas hills beyond. She'd driven past that property countless times on ambulance runs. It was Hoyt Renshaw's estate, the sprawling compound owned by Liberty's wealthiest and most influential resident. Without hesitation, Keaton grabbed her rescue gear from beside her locker at the EMT station. Her hands shook slightly as she threw her medical bag and wire cutters into her beat-up Ford pickup. She knew she had no legal right to enter Renshaw's property, but the image of that struggling cub wouldn't let her rest. The afternoon sun beat down as she pulled up to the imposing iron gates. Two armed guards in khaki uniforms stepped forward, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. "This is private property," the taller one barked. "Turn around now." Keaton's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "There's an animal in distress on this property. I'm here to help, ma'am. I won't tell you again. Leave, or we'll have to take action." She could see the white fencing from the video just beyond the tree line. The cubs had to be close. Without warning, Keaton gunned her engine and swerved around the gatepost where a section of fence was down. The guards shouted and ran toward their vehicle, but she was already bouncing across the uneven ground, following the fence line. The desperate mewling led her to them. The trapped cub's movements were getting weaker, while its brother rubbed against the jug, trying to help. Keaton jumped out, ignoring the sound of approaching vehicles. With trembling fingers, she worked to cut away the plastic prison. The free cub growled but didn't attack, seeming to sense her intentions. "Almost there, little one," she murmured, finally creating an opening large enough. The cub tumbled out, gasping and shaking. Its sibling immediately began grooming it. Both cubs, huddling together. The guard's SUV skidded to a stop behind her. "Hands where we can see them," they shouted, weapons drawn. Keaton slowly raised her hands, but her eyes stayed on the reunited cubs. She knew this wasn't over. She'd just made an enemy of the most powerful man in Liberty, but watching those cubs nuzzle each other, finally safe. She couldn't bring herself to regret it. Keaton's hands trembled as she dialed Dr. Romy Alcott's number. The leopard cub lay whimpering in her arms, still struggling to breathe normally after being trapped in that plastic jug. Behind her, Renshaw's security guards maintained a tense distance, their walkie-talkies crackling with urgent voices. "Dr. Alcott speaking?" came the calm voice on the other end. "Romy, it's Keaton Hale. I need you here at Renshaw's estate right now. I've got an injured leopard cub that needs immediate attention." There was a brief pause. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Keep it warm, and try not to move it too much." While waiting, Keaton cradled the cub close, speaking in soft, soothing tones. The second cub paced anxiously nearby, refusing to leave its brother. The guards shifted restlessly, their hands never far from their weapons. Within minutes, a dusty pickup truck came racing down the private road. Dr. Alcott jumped out, her medical bag already in hand. Her chestnut hair was hastily tied back, and her practical work clothes showed signs of a busy day at the clinic. "Let me see him," Romy said, kneeling beside Keaton. Her warm but steady eyes assessed the situation quickly. She pulled out a stethoscope and began examining the cub. Respiratory distress? Elevated heart rate? Possible dehydration? How long was he trapped? Unknown, Keaton replied, keeping her voice low. "The video's been circulating for hours." One of the guards stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're both trespassing on private property?" Romy didn't even look up. "I'm treating an injured animal. Unless you want to explain to the state wildlife authorities why you prevented emergency veterinary care, I suggest you step back." The guard's radio crackled again. "Sheriff's on his way." Keaton's stomach tightened, but she focused on helping. Romy, the veterinarian, worked efficiently, administering fluids and checking the cub's vital signs. "He's stabilizing," Romy murmured, "but he'll need ongoing care and observation." The sound of sirens cut through the tense atmosphere. Sheriff Lyle Benton's patrol car pulled up, kicking up dust. The heavy-set man stepped out, his face already flushed with anger. His uniform strained slightly at the buttons, and his badge gleamed in the sunlight. "What in blazes is going on here?" he demanded, stomping over. "Miss Hale, you're in serious trouble now." Before Keaton could respond, Another vehicle appeared, a sleek black SUV. Hoyt Renshaw himself emerged, looking every bit the wealthy rancher in his pressed clothes and polished boots. His silver hair caught the light, and his face wore a practiced expression of concern. "Now, Sheriff," Renshaw said smoothly, "let's not be hasty. This is clearly an unfortunate situation caused by careless littering." He gestured to the news van that had just pulled up behind him. "These things happen, sadly. The important thing is that the young animal is being cared for." Keaton watched in disbelief as Renshaw walked toward the gathering reporters. His demeanor, perfectly composed. Something felt off about his reaction, too polished, too ready with an explanation. "This is exactly why we need stricter anti-littering laws," Renshaw continued, smiling for the cameras. "My estate maintains the highest standards of care for our exotic animals. We're grateful to Miss Hale for her enthusiasm, though of course, there are proper channels for such concerns." Sheriff Benton grabbed Keaton's arm. "You're looking at breaking and entering? Trespassing." Sheriff Romey interrupted firmly. "I'm in the middle of treating this cub. Any interference could jeopardize its health. Are you prepared to take responsibility for that?" Benton's face darkened, but he released Keaton's arm. The reporters were recording everything, their cameras switching between the injured cub, concerned expression, and Keaton's determined face. "The plastic jug clearly came from outside our property," Renshaw continued smoothly. "We'll be increasing our security patrols to prevent such unfortunate incidents in the future. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to ensure our veterinary staff takes proper charge of the situation." Keaton felt her blood boiling. The way Renshaw spoke about the incident, it was too perfect, too rehearsed. She noticed how his eyes never actually showed real concern for the cub, how his gestures seemed calculated for the cameras. "Dr. Alcott is the attending veterinarian now," Keaton stated firmly. "The cub stays under her care." Renshaw's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Of course, we'll cooperate fully with Dr. Alcott. We want what's best for the animal." Romey finished her immediate treatment and stood up, positioning herself between the cub and Renshaw's men. "I'm taking both cubs to my clinic for observation. They've been traumatized and need specialized care." The reporters pressed closer, shouting questions. Renshaw handled them masterfully, speaking about conservation efforts and his dedication to protecting exotic animals. Each word seemed to twist the narrative further from the truth Keaton had witnessed. "Miss Hale," Sheriff Benton growled quietly, "this isn't over. Expect charges to be filed." Keaton helped Romey carefully load both cubs into her truck, her hands shaking with both anger and fear. She could feel Renshaw watching her, his public smile masking something much darker. The second cub still wouldn't leave its brother's side, even in the transport carrier. As they prepared to leave, Renshaw approached one final time, camera still rolling. "We appreciate your concern for our animals, Miss Hale. Though next time, perhaps use more appropriate channels." His words were friendly, but his eyes held a warning. Keaton met his gaze, the practiced smoothness of his performance, the way he'd turned potential scandal into a public relations opportunity. It all felt wrong. This wasn't just about a littering accident. Something more sinister lay beneath the surface, and she just stepped right into it. She climbed into her own vehicle, watching in the rearview mirror as Renshaw continued his performance for the media. Her heart raced with the realization that she'd crossed the line today, one that might have serious consequences. But the image of that struggling cub, and the calculated coldness in Renshaw's eyes, told her she'd made the right choice. Dangerous as it might be, Keaton pulled into her driveway just as the sun was setting, her mind still racing from the day's events. The familiar sight of her small ranch house did little to calm her nerves. As she stepped out of her truck, her phone buzzed with a text from Annie, one of the vet techs at Renshaw's estate, who had secretly slipped Keaton her number earlier. "Cubs scheduled for transfer tonight. Something feels off." Keaton's heart rate spiked. Transfer. Nobody had mentioned anything about moving. "The Cubs?" She quickly texted back. "What time?" "Midnight. Weird hours for a legit transfer." Keaton glanced at her watch. 8:30. She had a few hours to figure out what was really going on. Without even going inside her house, she jumped back in her truck and headed toward the estate's service entrance. The evening shift, security guard, was more relaxed than the daytime crew. Keaton recognized him from her EMT runs. She'd treated his daughter for an allergic reaction last summer. He gave her a casual wave as she drove past, assuming she was there on medical business. Parking behind the veterinary building, Keaton moved cautiously through the shadows. Light spilled from the windows, and she could hear voices inside. Pressing herself against the wall, she inched closer to listen. "Make sure those crates are properly labeled this time," a gruff voice ordered. "We can't afford another mix-up like last month." "Already done. A D4 on all of them, just like the manifest says." Keaton frowned. A D4. That didn't sound like any wildlife sanctuary code she knew. Carefully, she peered through the window. Several wooden crates were stacked near the door, and sure enough, each bore the mysterious AD for marking in bold black. LETTERSA. Stack of discarded packaging materials caught her eye. Moving quietly, she retrieved a torn shipping label from the pile. The destination information had been mostly destroyed, but she could make out part of an address in Asia. The implications hit her like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a legitimate transfer, it had all the hallmarks of illegal wildlife trafficking. Back in her truck, Keaton's hands shook as she filed an urgent complaint through her employer's ethics hotline. She detailed everything she'd seen and heard, including the suspicious labeling and Asian shipping documents. She also sent copies to the state wildlife authority and local law enforcement. The next morning, Keaton arrived at work only to find her supervisor, Marcus, waiting with a grim expression. "My office. Now." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus slid a formal letter across his desk. "Effective immediately. You're suspended pending investigation for reckless conduct and unauthorized access to private property." "What is ridiculous? I filed that complaint to protect endangered animals from being trafficked." Marcus held up his hand. "You trespassed on private property after hours. You've made serious allegations without proof. Mr. Renshaw's lawyers are threatening legal action." "Of course they are," Keaton said bitterly, "because they know I'm right. Turn in your badge and equipment. Security will escort you out." As Keaton walked through the hallway between two guards, her co-workers avoided eye contact. People she'd worked beside for years suddenly found their shoes fascinating. The isolation felt like a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders. In her car, Keaton's phone buzzed again. "Annie, they're moving everything up. Transfer happening in 1 hour. I'm sorry about your suspension." Keaton gripped her steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. They were trying to silence her, to make her back down. But those cubs needed someone to fight for them, someone who wouldn't give up just because the odds looked impossible. Started her engine. Let them suspend her. Let them threaten her with lawsuits. She wasn't going to sit quietly while those cubs disappeared into the black market. Someone powerful wanted her silenced, but they were about to learn just how stubborn one small-town EMT could be. Looking in her rearview mirror, she could see the security guards watching to make sure she left the premises. They thought they'd won, thought they'd scared her into submission, but Keaton was just getting started. Her mind raced through her options. She had evidence. The shipping label was still in her truck. She had Annie's texts documenting the suspicious transfer. Most importantly, she had the truth on her side. The system might be stacked against her, but Keaton had spent her whole career being underestimated. Sometimes that was the greatest advantage. Of all, the morning sun cast long shadows across Monroe Pike's cramped kitchen as he carefully spread out a stack of weathered documents on his wooden table. Keaton sat across from him, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her eyes were fixed on the retired USDA inspector's trembling hands as he pointed to various shipping manifests. "See here." Monroe adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "Agricultural Declaration for, that's what a D4 stands for on paper. It's supposed to be for routine livestock transport." He tapped a yellowed form with his finger. "But traffickers have been using it as a code for years. Hide exotic animals? In plain sight by listing them as standard farm shipments." Keaton leaned forward, her heart pounding. "So when we saw that crate labeled AD4 at Renshaw's, it wasn't meant for cattle or pigs." Monroe's face grew grave. "Those codes are part of a bigger operation. I've seen it before, wealthy folks using their legitimate businesses as cover for moving protected species across state lines. Renshaw's not just keeping those cubs as pets, he's part of a pipeline." The realization hit Keaton like a physical blow. A trafficking pipeline for big cats. Monroe nodded slowly. "Think about it, he's got the money, the land, the connections. Perfect setup for moving animals without raising suspicion. I tried tracking similar operations before I retired, but the higher-ups always shut me down." Keaton pushed back from the table, pacing the small kitchen. Her mind raced with implications. This is bigger than just those two cubs. How many animals has he moved through his property? How long has this been going on? That's what we need to find out. Monroe gathered the papers with careful precision. "But we can't do it alone. You'll need help, legal help, medical documentation, witnesses who know what to look for." Keaton pulled out her phone, her fingers already typing a message to Romy. The vet had proven herself trustworthy during the cub rescue, and her medical expertise would be crucial. "I'm calling in reinforcements." Within an hour, Romy arrived at Monroe's house, still wearing her clinic scrubs. Her usually neat chestnut hair was coming loose from its ponytail, but her eyes were sharp and focused as Monroe walked her through the evidence. "I knew something felt wrong about those shipping schedules," Romy said, examining the documents. "The timing never made sense for regular livestock transport, and the medical records I saw at the estate were incomplete, like they were trying to hide something." "We need one more person," Monroe said. "Someone who knows the law inside and out." He slid a business card across the table. "Greer Lawson. Best attorney I know when it comes to wildlife protection cases. She's been trying to build a case against operations like this for years." Keaton picked up the card, studying the embossed letters. "Will she help us?" "Only one way to find out," Monroe replied. They found Greer Lawson in her downtown office, surrounded by towering stacks of legal books and case files. The attorney listened intently as they laid out their discoveries, her expression growing more determined with each detail. A trafficking pipeline through Liberty. Greer's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up relevant statutes. This could be the break we've been waiting for, but we need concrete evidence, documentation, witnesses, physical proof of illegal transport. How do we get that legally? Keaton asked. Renshaw's got the place locked down tight since I went in for the Cubs. Greer smiled, a sharp, knowing expression. Through official channels, as a licensed veterinarian, Dr. Elcott has the right to request an inspection if she suspects animal welfare violations. And with Mr. Pike's background in USDA oversight, he can advise on proper procedure, an inspection. Romy straightened in her chair. They'll fight it, they'll try. Greer agreed, but if we do this by the book, document everything, and time it right. She spread out a calendar. We can catch them in the act. For the next 2 hours, they planned their approach. Monroe's knowledge of inspection protocols proved invaluable. As they mapped out every detail, Romy would file the official request, citing specific concerns from her time treating the Cubs. Keaton would gather additional evidence through legal channels, while Greer prepared the necessary paperwork to ensure their actions stayed within bounds of the law. Remember, Monroe warned as they finished, Renshaw's got friends in high places. Once we start this, there's no going back. He'll come at us with everything he's got. Keaton looked around at her small but determined group of allies. The retired inspector with decades of experience, the compassionate vet willing to risk her career, and the sharp-minded attorney ready to take on the fight. For the first time since finding those Cubs, she felt real hope. Then we better make sure we do this right, she said firmly. Those animals can't speak for themselves. But we can speak for them. Romy reached across the table and squeezed Keaton's hand. We will together. We will together. As they left Greer's office, the weight of their mission settled over them. What had started with one desperate rescue was now expanding into something much larger, a chance to expose and dismantle a criminal network that had operated in shadows for too long. The Cubs that had sparked this fight were just the beginning. Now they had the chance to save countless more animals from the same fate. Monroe paused at his car, looking back at Keaton. You know, when I first retired, I thought I was done fighting these battles. But maybe this is why I kept all those old files. Maybe I was just waiting for someone brave enough to use them. Keaton thought about the Cubs, about all the other animals that might be suffering in similar situations. Sometimes being brave isn't a choice, she replied. Sometimes it's just doing what needs to be done. They spent the rest of the afternoon gathering their resources and setting their plan. In motion, Romy began preparing the official inspection request, carefully documenting every medical concern she'd observed. Monroe dug deeper into his records, looking for patterns in past shipments that might reveal more about the trafficking network. Greer started building their legal framework, ensuring every step they took would stand up to scrutiny. The path ahead would be challenging, but they had truth on their side. And sometimes, Keaton realized, that was enough to start changing the world. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as Monroe, Pike's old Ford pickup, rolled up to Renshaw's estate gates. Keaton sat in the passenger seat, her heart pounding against her ribs as she watched Monroe flash his USDA credentials at the security checkpoint. Behind them, Greer Lawson's silver sedan completed their small convoy. Something's not right, Monroe muttered, squinting through his glasses at the unusual amount of activity ahead. Camera crews were setting up equipment, while men in pressed uniforms directed traffic with practiced efficiency. As they pulled through the gates, Keaton's stomach dropped. Hoyt Renshaw himself stood waiting at the main building, dressed in an immaculate ranch outfit, his silver hair perfectly styled. A practiced smile spread across his face as he approached their vehicles. Inspector Pike, Renshaw called out warmly. What a pleasant surprise. Though I wish you'd called ahead. We're in the middle of filming a documentary segment on our conservation efforts. His eyes flickered briefly to Keaton, cold despite his friendly demeanor. Monroe cleared his throat. Standard procedure, Mr. Renshaw. We're here for a welfare check. Of course, Renshaw gestured expansively. Please, join our tours. We're just about to showcase our state-of-the-art facilities. Keaton watched helplessly as Renshaw masterfully took control of the situation. Camera crews followed their every move as he led them through spotless enclosures. Every animal they saw appeared healthy and well cared for, making their suspicions seem groundless. As you can see, Renshaw narrated for the cameras, each habitat exceeds federal requirements. Our veterinary records are impeccable. He paused by a leopard enclosure, where a healthy adult cat lounged in the shade. We take pride in our commitment to these magnificent creatures. Keaton's frustration mounted as she realized how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. Every potential red flag had been carefully hidden away, replaced by this polished performance. A commotion from the parking area caught their attention. Greer came hurrying over, her face flushed with anger. They're towing my car, she announced. In a low voice, claiming it's illegally parked in a restricted area, Renshaw's smile didn't waver. Oh dear, what an unfortunate misunderstanding. I'm sure it can be sorted out at the impound lot in town. His eyes met Keaton's briefly, the message crystal clear. He could make their lives very difficult. The inspection concluded without a single documented violation. As they drove away, defeat hung heavy in the air. He knew we were coming, Monroe said quietly. Someone tipped him off. Keaton nodded, her jaw set with determination. But we're not giving up. Later that night, Keaton drove home along the dark country roads, her mind racing with plans for their next move. The headlights of an approaching truck caught her attention. It was moving erratically, drifting into her lane. Her heart jumped as she realized it was deliberately heading straight for her. She yanked the wheel hard, but the truck swerved with her. The impact was devastating. Metal screamed against metal as her pickup was forced off the road. The world spun violently as her vehicle tumbled down the embankment, finally coming to rest on its side in a drainage ditch. Pain lanced through her body as she hung suspended by her seatbelt. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth from where she'd bit her lip. With trembling hands, she managed to release the belt. Falling awkwardly against the driver's side door, somewhere above, she heard the other truck's engine revving before its taillights disappeared into the night. They'd left her for dead. Fighting waves of dizziness, Keaton forced herself to focus. She couldn't smell gas, which was good. The passenger window was shattered, an escape route. Every movement sent shards of pain through her ribs. But she kept going, dragging herself out through the broken glass. The cool night air hit her face as she finally emerged from the wreckage. Her whole body shook as she crawled up the muddy embankment, determination driving her forward inch by inch. She needed to get to the road, to find help. As she reached the asphalt, headlights appeared in the distance. This time, they belonged to a legitimate passing motorist who stopped to help. Already dialing 911 on their phone, lying on the roadside waiting for the ambulance, Keaton stared up at the stars. The message behind the attack was clear. Renshaw would stop at nothing to silence them. But as fear tried to take hold, she felt something else rising up stronger. Pure, unwavering resolve. If he thought this would make her back down, he didn't know who he was dealing with. This wasn't just about the Cubs anymore. This was about standing up to corruption, about refusing to let evil win just because it wore an expensive smile and had powerful friends. Her body might be battered, but her spirit was unbroken. In fact, it was stronger than ever. When the ambulance arrived, her fellow EMTs found her conscious and alert, already planning her next move. They wanted to check her for a concussion, but her mind was perfectly clear. Renshaw had just shown his hand. He was desperate enough to attempt murder, which meant they were closer to exposing him than she'd realized. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Keaton's determination crystallized into steel. Renshaw thought he'd won, thought he'd scared her into submission. But he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, because now she knew exactly what kind of man she was dealing with, and she wasn't going to stop until she brought him down. Keaton sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen as social media notifications continued to pour in about the viral video. Her ribs still ached from the car accident, and an untouched cup of coffee had gone cold beside her. The weight of defeat pressed heavily on her shoulders. Everything she'd tried had backfired. The inspection, gathering evidence, even driving home safely. It seemed Renshaw was always 10 steps ahead. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally, she'd let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Keaton? The voice was familiar, though she hadn't heard it in years. Her breath caught in her throat. Dane? She whispered, hardly believing it. Her estranged brother, who'd walked away from the family 5 years ago without looking back. We need to talk, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not over the phone. Can you meet me? 20 minutes later, Keaton pulled into the back lot of Barker's feed store, her heart thundering in her chest. A black pickup truck was already parked in the shadows. As she killed her engine, a tall figure emerged, broader than she remembered, with new scars on his weathered face, but unmistakably her brother. You look terrible, were his first words to her. Yeah. Well, getting run off the road will do that, she replied sharply. What do you want, Dane? He ran a hand through his short cropped hair, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. I'm the one who uploaded the video, he said finally. The one of the Cubs. The words hit Keaton like a physical blow. I work security for Renshaw, Dane continued, his voice tight. Have been for the past 2 years. The whole thing, the Cub and the jug, all of it, it was staged. A PR stunt. Keaton felt the world tilt sideways. What are you talking about? Renshaw's been under investigation. He needed good publicity, something to make him look like a victim of circumstance rather than a perpetrator. The plan was to plant the jug, let one Cub get accidentally trapped, then have his own people rescue it. Perfect media story. Renshaw's team saving innocent wildlife from careless litter bugs. Bile rose in Keaton's throat, but something went wrong. Dane nodded, looking sick. The second Cub? Nobody counted on him refusing to leave his brother. The way he kept trying to help, kept staying close. It wasn't part of the script. And then you showed up before Renshaw's people could execute their rescue plan. Keaton leaned against her truck, legs weak. So you leaked the original footage. I couldn't. Dane's voice cracked. Watching them deliberately trap that Cub, seeing his brother trying so hard to help him, it brought back memories. The unspoken words hung heavy between them, memories of their own childhood, of Dane always trying to protect her from their father's rages, until the day he couldn't take it anymore and walked away. Why didn't you come to me directly? Keaton asked, old pain mixing with new understanding. Shame, Dane admitted. Fear. I've been part of Renshaw's operation, Keaton. The things I've seen, the things I've helped cover up. I'm not the brother. You used to know. You leaked the video, she pointed out. That counts for something. He gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, and look what it got you. Suspended from your job, run off the road. I should have known Renshaw would figure out where the leak came from. He's probably already planning how to deal with me. Then help me stop him, Keaton said, taking a step forward. You have insider knowledge, evidence. Together we could. It's not that simple. Dane cut her off. Renshaw's operation goes deeper than you know. The exotic animal trafficking is just the surface. He's got politicians in his pocket, law enforcement on his payroll, all the more reason to expose him, Keaton insisted. Dane, those cubs are just the beginning. How many other animals have suffered because of his schemes? How many more will Chief saw the conflict in his eyes, the same stubborn sense of justice that had once driven him to stand between her and danger. Warring with years of cynicism and self-preservation, I have documentation, he said finally. Security logs, shipping manifestos, video footage from the compound. I've been collecting it, telling myself it was insurance. But really, he trailed off. Really? You were waiting for a chance to make things right, Keaton finished softly. Dane met her eyes for the first time since they'd started talking. I'm sorry, Keaton, for everything. For leaving? For not being there? For getting caught up in all this? I know, she said, and found she meant it. The anger she'd carried for years was still there, but alongside it now was understanding. So, help me fix it. He nodded slowly. Renshaw's got another shipment coming in 3 days. Codename Prairie Dawn. It's bigger than anything they've moved before, not just big cats, but other exotics too. The documentation's hidden in a storage unit in town. If we can get it to the right people, I know some people, Keaton said, thinking of Monroe and Greer. People who'll know what to do with evidence like that. It won't be safe, Dane warned. Renshaw's already tried to kill you once. Then I guess it's good. I've got my big brother watching my back again, Keaton replied, offering a small smile. The corner of Dane's mouth twitched up. The ghost of the brother she remembered. Yeah, I guess it is. As they began planning how to access the storage unit and who to trust with the evidence, Keaton felt something shift inside her. The revelation that the viral video had been staged had initially felt like another defeat. But now, with her brother's insider knowledge and his step toward redemption, it had become something else, a turning point. For the first time since this all began, she felt real hope. This wasn't just about saving 2 leopard cubs anymore. It was about exposing a corrupt system, about family finding its way back to each other, about the chance to make right what had gone so wrong. And this time, she wasn't fighting alone. Monroe's living room had become their makeshift command center. Maps and documents covered every surface, and the air was thick with determination. Keaton, still nursing bruises from the ambush, studied the information Dane had provided about Renshaw's transport routes. These shipments always follow the same pattern, Dane explained, pointing to a highlighted route on the map. His weathered face showed the strain of betraying his employer, but there was relief there too. The AD4 trailers move on Thursdays, usually after midnight. Monroe adjusted his spectacles, squinting at the documents. That matches the pattern I noticed during my USDA days. They think using agricultural shipping codes makes them invisible. Romy spread out medical supplies on the coffee table, tranquilizer reversal drugs, and emergency equipment. If these cubs are sedated for transport, we need to be ready. Their lives could depend on immediate treatment. Keaton watched as Monroe made a careful phone call to his federal contact, speaking in measured tones about suspicious wildlife trafficking activity. After hanging up, he nodded. Agent Martinez is willing to coordinate, but we need solid evidence. Catch them in the act. They worked through the night, planning every detail. Dane provided the tracking device, small, powerful, and virtually undetectable. I know exactly when they load the trailers, he said. I can plant this without raising suspicion. The next evening, Keaton's phone buzzed with confirmation. The tracker was in place on a trailer marked AD4 in faded letters. They watched its movement on Monroe's laptop, a tiny dot crawling along back roads. They're taking Route 4, Keaton said, her heart racing, just like Dane predicted. Monroe's federal contact had positioned vehicles strategically along the route. The team waited in their own car, engine idling on a quiet stretch of highway. Romy checked her medical kit for the 10th time. The night was dark and still, broken only by distant cricket songs. Dotted exactly 2:17 in the morning, headlights appeared. The trailer matched Dane's description perfectly. Keaton held her breath as federal vehicles smoothly moved into position, boxing in the transport truck. Red and blue lights suddenly illuminated the scene. The driver, caught completely off guard, had no choice but to pull over. Keaton watched as Agent Martinez approached with proper warrants in hand. The driver's protests died when agents opened the trailer doors. Inside, just as Dane had warned, they found 3 sedated tiger cubs lying on dirty straw. The transport papers were obvious forgeries. Monroe spotted the discrepancies immediately. These USDA codes don't exist, he said, voice tight with controlled anger. Romy rushed forward with her medical kit. They're alive, but heavily sedated, she reported, checking vital signs. We need to get them stabilized immediately. Agent Martinez took charge, his badge glinting in the emergency lights. Based on these violations, we're seizing these animals. Dr. Alcott, you have temporary custody authorization to transport them to Big Cat Sanctuary in Houston. Keaton watched as the cubs were carefully moved to Romy's properly equipped vehicle. Her throat felt tight with emotion. After weeks of setbacks and dangers, they'd finally landed a solid blow against Renshaw's operation. This is just the beginning, Monroe said quietly, standing beside her. But it's a good one. These cubs will be safe now. Dawn was breaking as they followed Romy's vehicle to the sanctuary. The first rays of sunlight caught the metal bars of the transport cage, where 3 small lives lay sleeping, finally protected by the law. For the first time since this all began, Keaton felt real hope surge through her chest. The sanctuary staff were waiting when they arrived, ready with proper medical facilities and care protocols. Keaton watched as the cubs were gently transferred. Inside, knowing they would wake up in a place of safety and healing. Thank you, she said to Dane, who stood awkwardly at the edge of the group, for helping make this happen. He nodded, emotion flickering across his scarred face. It's a start, he replied softly. There's more to do, but it's a start. As the sun rose fully over the sanctuary, Keaton felt the weight of their first real victory settle into her bones. They had proof now, documentation, and witnesses. More importantly, they had 3 living, breathing reasons to keep fighting. The cubs would be evidence in the case against Renshaw, but more than that, they were symbols of hope, proof that justice was possible, even against powerful opponents. The morning sun streamed through the sanctuary's windows, casting golden light across the leopard cubs as they played. Keaton watched them tumble and chase each other, her heart full. After everything they'd been through, seeing them safe and happy felt like a miracle. The smaller cub, the one who'd been trapped in the jug, now bounded around with renewed energy, his brother never far behind. But the peace wouldn't last. Her phone buzzed. It was Greer, their attorney. Keaton, we have trouble. Big trouble. Judge Martinez just issued a new ruling. Keaton's stomach dropped. What kind of ruling? He's overturning the custody order. Says there wasn't sufficient evidence of wrongdoing to justify removing the cubs from Renshaw's care. Greer's voice shook with anger. The judge is claiming our seizure was an overreach of authority. That's impossible. Keaton pressed her hand against the glass, watching the cubs wrestle. We had documentation, transport papers, everything, Judge. Martinez has ties to Renshaw, old hunting buddies. Should have known he'd pull strings. Greer sighed heavily. They're coming to collect the cubs within the hour. Keaton's legs went weak. She slid down the wall, phone clutched to her ear. There has to be something we can do. An appeal? An appeal? I'm trying everything, but Martinez fast-tracked this. It's like he had the paperwork ready and waiting. Within 45 minutes, Renshaw's men arrived with animal control vehicles. Keaton stood helplessly by as the cubs were sedated and loaded into transport cages. The smaller one reached a paw through the bars toward her, and she had to turn away, tears burning her eyes. That evening, she sat in Monroe's kitchen, surrounded by their dejected team. Romy nursed a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Monroe stared out the window, his usual energy depleted. They were waiting for Dane to arrive. He'd texted saying he had new information about Renshaw's next moves, but Dane never showed. The first call came from a gas station attendant who'd found Dane's phone in a puddle of blood behind the building. The second was from Sheriff Benton, his gruff voice unusually gentle, as he described the scene, signs of a struggle. More blood spatter on the concrete, and drag marks leading to tire tracks. Your brother's tough, Keaton, Benton said. We'll find him. But the words rang hollow. Keaton knew exactly what this was. Renshaw's revenge for Dane's betrayal. She drove to the gas station, ignoring Romy's protests that she shouldn't go alone. The crime scene tape fluttered in the evening breeze. Small numbered markers dotted the ground where evidence had been collected. The blood, Dane's blood, had already been washed away, but Keaton could still see darker patches on the concrete. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. If you're smart, you'll walk away now. The voice was distorted, mechanical. Your brother made his choice. Don't make his mistake. The call ended before she could respond. Keaton stood there, surrounded by the hollow echo of failure. The cubs were gone. Dane was missing. And somewhere, Renshaw was smiling, confident he'd won. Back at her apartment, she found an envelope shoved under her door. Inside were photos, surveillance shots of Romy leaving her clinic, Monroe getting his mail, Greer walking to her car. The message was clear. Everyone she cared about was being watched. She sank onto her couch, the weight of defeat crushing her chest. The wall she'd used to pin up evidence about Renshaw's operation now seemed to mock her. News clippings, shipping, manifests, the viral video that had started it all. None of it had been enough. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Monroe. They're pressuring the clinic to revoke Romy's license, he said without preamble. Some nonsense about improper documentation of controlled substances, and Greer's firm is suddenly facing an audit. He's just destroying everyone who helped me. Keaton's voice cracked. Listen to me, kid. Maybe Maybe it's time to step back. Regroup. We're no good to those animals if we're all taken out of the game permanently. She wanted to argue, to insist they couldn't give up. But the bloody scene at the gas station flashed. Through her mind, Dane had tried to do the right thing, and now he was gone. How many more people would get hurt if she kept pushing? The fight felt over, not just lost, but shattered beyond repair. The system she'd hoped would protect the innocent had been twisted to serve the powerful. Her allies were under siege, and her own brother, the surprise ally who'd risked everything to help, was paying the price for his conscience. Keaton stared at her reflection in the window, barely recognizing the defeated woman looking back. The determined EMT who'd stormed Renshaw's gates to save a suffering cub seemed like a stranger now. All her efforts had led here, to an empty apartment, a missing brother, and the knowledge that those cubs were back in the hands of a man who saw them as nothing but commodities to be sold. She turned off her phone, unable to bear any more bad news. The night pressed in around her, as suffocating as the plastic jug that had trapped that desperate cub. Only now, she was the one who couldn't breathe, couldn't see a way out, couldn't find hope in the darkness. Somewhere out there Dane needed her. The cubs needed her. But for the first time since this fight began, Keaton Hale had no idea how to save anyone, not even herself. The silence of her apartment was broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the soft ticking of a clock, counting down minutes that brought no answers, no relief, and no escape from the crushing weight of failure. The wind howled across the darkened ranchland as Keaton's flashlight beam cut through the night. Her hands trembled, but not from the cold. 3 days had passed since Dane's disappearance, and every second without word from him felt like torture. But tonight, a text had arrived from an unknown number. Pump house. North fence. Look behind. Loose panel. Monroe Pike stood beside her, his weathered face grim as they approached the small structure. It was barely bigger than a garden shed, its metal walls rusted and forgotten. The perfect hiding place. Your brother was smart, Monroe muttered, testing the padlock. Nobody's used this pump station in years. Renshaw's men wouldn't think to look here. Keaton's fingers found the loose panel, exactly where the message had indicated. Behind it, wrapped in waterproof plastic, sat a thick black ledger. Her hands shook as she opened it under the flashlight beam. Oh my God, she breathed. Page after page of meticulous records sprawled before her. Shipping manifests, payment schedules, contact lists, dates, locations, amounts, everything. This is his insurance policy, Monroe said softly. Dane knew what he was doing. He documented everything. Back at Greer's office, they spread the ledger across her desk. The attorney's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. This is incredible. Look, bribes to customs officials, fake veterinary certificates, shell company accounts. He's got every transaction logged. Can we use it? Keaton asked, hope rising in her chest for the first time in days. Use it. Greer's smile was fierce. With this, we can get a federal warrant. This isn't just about the cubs anymore. This is interstate trafficking, money laundering, corruption. Renshaw's entire operation is laid bare. Thunder rolled outside. As rain began to pelt the windows, Keaton stared at the latest entry, dated just 2 days ago. Major transfer scheduled R auction house. Full inventory clearance before shutdown. The cattle auction, Monroe said. It's perfect cover. Nobody looks twice at livestock trailers there. Greer was already on the phone with her federal contact. We need to move fast. That auction's tomorrow night. The next 12 hours passed. In a blur of preparation, federal agents arrive, warrant in hand. Plans were drawn up, positions mapped. The auction house sat on the outskirts of town, its sprawling lot already filling with trailers as the storm intensified. Keaton sat in her truck, watching lightning split the sky. Her radio crackled, Greer's voice coming through. Teams are in position. Remember, we wait until we confirm the presence of illegal cargo. No one moves until my signal. Rain hammered the roof as Keaton thought of Dane. Was he still alive? Had he known, when he hid that ledger, that it might be his last act of redemption? The growing storm matched her turbulent emotions. Fear, determination, hope, and grief all swirling together. Activity at the loading dock. Monroe's voice came over the radio. 3 unmarked trailers pulling in. Keaton gripped her steering wheel tighter, heart pounding. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she could make out Renshaw's familiar figure, standing beneath the auction house awning. Even now, he looked perfectly composed in his pressed ranch where, seemingly unbothered by the storm raging around them, remember, Greer's voice was steady in her ear. We've got one shot at this. Everything we've fought for comes down to tonight. The ledger sat heavy in Keaton's passenger seat, her brother's last gift. The key to bringing down an empire built on cruelty and greed. Whatever happened next, Dane's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. The truth would finally come to light. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the auction house in stark relief. Keaton checked her watch. In less than an hour, Renshaw's livestock transfer would begin. But this time, they were ready. This time, justice wouldn't be denied. The radio crackled one final time, Greer's voice cutting through the storm. All units stand by. Operation is go in 10 minutes. This ends tonight. Thunder cracked overhead as rain hammered down on the cattle auction grounds. Keaton's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched behind a rusted feed trough, watching Renshaw's men load the heavy transport trailer. Through sheets of rain, she could make out the dark shapes of cages being moved inside. 3 minutes until the convoy moves, Romy whispered beside her, checking her phone. Federal agents are in position, but they're still waiting for final confirmation. Keaton nodded, rainwater streaming down her face. We can't wait. Those cubs won't survive another transfer. She squeezed Romy's hand once, then darted forward through the downpour. The massive trailer's wheels were already turning as Keaton reached it, mud splashing beneath her boots. Without hesitation, she dove beneath the moving vehicle, her hands finding the undercarriage. The ground scraped inches from her face as she pulled herself along. Through the metal grating above, she heard the desperate yowl of one of the leopard cubs. The sound steeled her resolve. She'd come too far to fail now. Her fingers found the emergency release lever for the cage locks, a safety requirement. Renshaw's outfit had foolishly left intact. Stop her, a guard's shout carried over the storm. Boots splashed through puddles, closing in. The trailer picked up speed. Keaton yanked the lever hard. Above her, cage doors sprung open with metallic clangs. The loyal leopard brother slammed repeatedly against his bars, refusing to leave without his sibling. His dedication gave her strength. Suddenly, the trailer lurched to a violent halt. Keaton nearly lost her grip as tires skidded in the mud. Shouts and the sound of fighting erupted from the cab. Federal agents, everyone freeze. The command boomed through a megaphone, barely audible over the storm. Keaton began to pull herself out from under the trailer, but a heavy boot pressed down on her back. She looked up to see Sheriff Benton's rain-streaked face, his service weapon aimed at her head. Should have stayed out of this, girl, he growled. Now, I've got cause too. It's all live. Romy's voice rang out across the yard. She held her phone high, the screen glowing in the darkness. Everything's being streamed. The whole world is watching. Benton's face went slack with shock. In that moment of hesitation, Keaton kicked out, catching him in the knee. He stumbled back with a curse, through the chaos. She spotted a familiar figure staggering from the truck's cab. Dane? His face bloodied, but very much alive. He'd taken down the driver. Their eyes met across the rain-lashed yard, and years of hurt and misunderstanding dissolved in an instant of understanding. Keaton, look out. Dane's warning came just as Renshaw himself emerged from the shadows, a hunting rifle raised. But before he could fire, Dane tackled him full force. Both men went down hard in the mud. They grappled desperately until Dane finally pinned him, twisting the rifle away. Red and blue lights suddenly flooded the scene, as federal vehicles poured in from all directions. Agents in tactical gear swarmed the yard, securing suspects and evidence. Keaton saw Sheriff Benton being cuffed, his badge torn from his uniform. She rushed to help Romy, who was already working to calm the frightened cubs. The brother leopards huddled together in their opened cage, refusing to be separated even now. Their loyalty to each other brought tears to Keaton's eyes. You did it, Romy said softly, reaching for her hand. You actually did it. We did it, Keaton corrected her, squeezing back. I couldn't have made it without you. The rain began to ease as federal agents led Renshaw away in handcuffs. His carefully maintained facade had crumbled, leaving only a bitter old man who'd finally lost his power. Dane approached them slowly, holding his ribs. Despite his injuries, he managed a small smile. Guess I owed you one, sis. Or maybe 1,000. Keaton pulled her brother into a fierce hug, not caring about the mud and blood. You came back, that's what matters. A senior federal agent walked over, extending a hand to Keaton. We've been building this case for months. Your evidence and dedication broke it wide open. How would you feel about making this kind of work official? He held out a federal wildlife agent's badge, its surface gleaming in the emergency lights. Keaton looked at Romy, who nodded encouragement, then at Dane, who gave her a proud smile. The leopard cubs watched from their cage, finally safe, finally together. Their journey had mirrored her own, fighting against impossible odds, refusing to give up on family, and emerging stronger for it. I'd be honored, she said, accepting the badge as the storm clouds finally began to break. The first rays of dawn pierced the darkness, illuminating a scene transformed. Where there had been corruption and cruelty, justice had prevailed. Where family bonds had been broken, they were now renewed. And where a lonely EMT had once stood alone against power, there now stood a woman surrounded by love, trust, and purpose. The loyal Leopard brothers were the first to be loaded into proper transport vehicles. Headed for a legitimate sanctuary, they would stay together, their bond unbroken. Keaton watched them go, her hand clasped with Romy's, her brother's steady in presence beside her. Sometimes the hardest fights were the ones most worth winning, if this ending felt like it was written for you. Subscribe and join me tomorrow for another story that might feel the same.